Everyone, this is Illia, co-founder of Near, and with me, Kendall, co-founder of Proximity. Today, we're going to talk about AI at Near and some exciting developments. So, to remind you, the vision of Near is to become blockchain for AI. We believe the AI is going to be how we interface computing going forward, and whoever controls AI will be in control of effectively everything. Now, to ensure that this control is actually equitable and everyone has kind of equal right and user ownership, we need a way to enable this user owned AI. And there's a whole stack of technologies that kind of powering that, starting from what will run on your device and become effectively your interface for user owned AI, and for navigating the internet in computing. You can imagine this is a system that effectively knows how to interact on your behalf and is able to make decisions. And you can actually delegate it because you trust it will make decisions that are best for you, not for some other company making money off you. Now, that itself actually creates a really interesting opportunity for peer to peer because now we have lots of middleman companies which are effectively we delegate our decision authority to. Right? This is everything from local supermarket choosing what products to stock to FDA deciding what pharmaceutical medicine is good for you. If you have AI system that's yours, it can go directly and talk to every factory and every pharmaceutical company and find the best product for you. Now, there's another approach kind of that lies in the middle, which is companies and products that are living beyond control of any single person, right? We usually in crypto talk about them as the decentralized organization, but they've never been autonomous, right? They traditionally have been, very much kind of operated by humans and usually fail because of the coordination problems. And so today we want to talk about kind of how this is evolving and some exciting ideas and updates. But to start with, we've introduced on specific proximity, introduced this idea of shade agents. And I'll let Kendall kind of talk through this concept and we can start expanding from there.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and I think that's a great overview. There's a lot of parallels between the vision for user and AI and the original crypto vision of kind of user owned or at least user beneficial finance. But I think it's, as you mentioned, we had it in a lot of ways. We made a lot of good progress towards that. But I think if you look at most of the the financial products, the DeFi protocols that exist, or the DAOs that exist, like you're right, they're not truly autonomous. They actually still do have a lot of intermediaries, even if they're different intermediaries. And so like there's still a lot we can do to kind of advance on that vision. So that's actually a big part of the reason that at Proximity we were exploring sort of that path of how do we expand both what these like crypto protocols can do, these DeFi protocols can do, um, while also kind of enabling these agentic systems that won't have these decentralized parties or decentralized intermediaries. So that's kind of like the basis for what became shade agents. So to provide some context on like what shade agents actually are, um, really it's about taking like what crypto has done really well, especially initially Ethereum and now Near, Solana, a lot of these other kind of layer one smart contract based blockchains, is they created this basically the idea of a smart contract, this kind of very verifiable, self-executing kind of contract, piece of code, system, whatever it might be. One of the big downsides and challenges that we've had to overcome is they're pretty limited into like, well, how much computation they can actually use, and then even more so, like what data and information they have access to. They obviously have access to everything that exists on the blockchain, but given that there's plenty of context that happens in the real world that's useful or even necessary to build financial products, systems, whatever it may be, introduce kind of this problem that everyone calls the Oracle problem, and that's why we had companies like Chainlink and Pip and others who have attempted to solve that. But the reality of it is that even those companies and those solutions are still very limited in what they can do and what they can offer. So what we set out to do is basically take advantage of the insane improvements of the mode with different AI models, LLMs, etc., um, and take the principles of a blockchain, which is this verified code that exists in a smart contract, and try to expand basically this auditable, verifiable barrier that exists in a smart contract to encompass an agentic system. And kind of uphold the principles of smart contracts and DeFi, which are like no single points of failure, fully verified workflows, non-custodial nature. And like those are kind of the key aspects. So what that looks like in practice is actually a combination. Like basically each shade agent is has two components. One is a smart contract, and the other is kind of a what we call a worker agent. So really just an agent that a lot of developers have been building. And the relationship between the two is extremely important and tightly coupled. Basically, the shade agent, the code the worker agent, the code that is running in the worker agent needs to be verified in the smart contract. And a key part of that is using some of the hardware improvements that a lot of these manufacturers have made that they call a trusted execution environment. The idea of which is that you can have some code running on a CPU, and you can create kind of a proof that that code as to what code is running in that CPU. And then, fortunately with Near, where you can actually, verify fairly large payloads on chain, you in the smart contract can basically verify that code that was running is a specific piece of code. And we can get into the details of that later, but the outcome of that is that you can basically extend that trust barrier of a smart contract, that kind of transparency barrier, to agent code as well. And then where it gets even more interesting is that you can also use this system to make it so that you can have a multi-agent system where each of these agents are verified and they're using the smart contract to kind of collaborate. So that's sort of the details of it, and where it gets really interesting is the use cases. And I think most importantly, it's going to enable us to and developers to build kind of the original vision of DeFi, which is basically these actually intermediary-less systems that are also very powerful, have access to real-world state and context, can make intelligent decisions, and basically smart contracts that are actually smart. It's like putting the smart in the smart contract, which is, I mean, I think if we look at like the protocols that are the sort of true keeping up the true ethos of DeFi, it's almost exclusively something like Uniswap, right? You have this like purely market-based, no humans in the loop system. Basically everything else in DeFi, or almost everything else in DeFi, has humans in the loop somewhere, usually through a DAO. But those DAOs are made up of people and introduce a lot of the same governance challenges that we have as humans off-chain. And so, with shade agents, we're actually going to be able to, really like build more Uniswap really ethos preserving projects that that are going to just be able to do a lot more.
Yeah, super cool. And I mean, maybe worth mentioning a few examples that either live and as well as in development.
Yeah, for sure. So the first example that was shipped is what we call like the Mindshare trading agent. And so as a lot of people who pay attention to crypto Twitter are aware, there's a couple companies in particular, Kaito, that have popped up that are measuring basically Mindshare and attention that different cryptocurrency projects have, and are able to like gain primarily on Twitter, but even using other kind of social media sources as well. And this has become like a pretty good metric for success. The challenge is like this data proven exclusively exists off chain in Kaito's APIs and Cookie and some of the other projects like Lunar Crash or whatever that exist. And so it's not really a good way to create an autonomous system that just makes decisions based on this data input. So what we launched as an example is this Mindshare trading agent that basically will using the shade agent framework, it'll actually access this Kaito data, kind of see which crypto assets are trending, or like what the relationship between the crypto assets and their Mindshare, like how it's evolved over the course of the day, and then it'll actually rebalance the portfolio based on that information. So as projects do a good job of gaining more Mindshare, it'll rebalance the portfolio to have that asset be a larger share of the portfolio. And if they trend down, it'll kind of reverse that decision. And so right now that's just trading with a team called Yonder's Capital. That was like kind of the initial launch of this, but it's actually up almost 50% from when it launched. Now, not investing or trading advice by any means. I think Mindshare is very much like a single limited input, but it's cool to see that it's done a good job. I think most impressively is this system can actually just truly run autonomously. So right now, Yonder as a team, I think, is running one of the worker agents instances. But what's cool about it is that anyone can actually take this open source GitHub repo and they can spin up a worker agent and participate in this system in the same way that the Yonder team's instance is participated. So if Yonder, for instance, were to say, "Oh, we don't want to run this anymore. Like we're done. We'll just, this isn't worth it us to run this instance." Someone else could just kind of basically deploy this code, prove that they're running the right code, and then keep the system going. And so I think that's like a really interesting primitive, for these systems. So that was the first example that was launched. And then that same team is actually working on another version that's I think going to be the first kind of user accessible version. And what that agent is aiming to do is to basically normalize the interest rate across different instances of Aave to start. Because Aave obviously is known as, I mean, I think right now it's actually the largest DeFi protocol, and has been in the top three for years at this point. So it's established a lot of trust, right? It's like it's a very trusted product, never really loses money, very safe and secure, and people treat it like a bank account. That being said, it's deployed on at least 6, 7, or 8 different chains or L2s right now, and those rates tend to differ even for something just like USDC, which is natively issued on most of those chains. Um, and they can differ, like those rates can actually differ pretty widely. So, the team saw this as an opportunity to create basically a shade agent that is aiming to basically keep as many of the kind of security guarantees of Aave as possible, while also helping to maximize the yield, starting with USDC, that can be earned. The idea is basically to kind of keep this idea of like this is the safest space to keep your money on chain while earning some yield, but then also make sure that we can capture the rates across these different Aave instances and really realize the vision of like the reality of it is like you're trusting Aave more than you're trusting any of the underlying infrastructure that it's being deployed on, right? And so the rate, especially for something like USDC or USDT that is natively issued, should actually be more or less the same or very, very similar, small differences across any of the instances that it exists on. And so this agent is going to be able to take those funds on behalf of users and basically just maximize those rates without really introducing too many other moving pieces or guarantees that the user has to take on. So that one is going to be, I think, very interesting because it'll the entirety of the code base will be verified on chain. It's going to be fully audited, like the entire scope of the system will be fully audited. And initially, at least, it's only going to interact with Aave and Circle CCTP. So some very, very, high security kind of, safe systems. And the idea there is like really demonstrating to users that they can utilize these agentic systems while still feeling very confident in the fact that they're going to, earn even more yield or like benefit having a more efficient and effective system than they would have been able to, to build or utilize on their own, while also, proving that this can be done in a very, very safe way. Because like, we do believe agentic commerce is the future of commerce, but I think we haven't seen a whole lot of examples yet of people like systems that people feel very confident in actually like storing their funds in. And I expect this will be one of the first ones.
Yeah, I mean, super cool. I think that this is one of the kind of two, like from two sides. On one side, DeFi has been extremely complicated. It's very like strange that presumably things that should be like market equal are very different across different places, but it is explained because it's actually really hard to move assets around. It's complicated. You need to know gas fees, etc. So people just don't do it, and so it creates like a lot of suboptimal behavior because of just like regular complexity. And I think generally the fact like DeFi has been living on this farming concept is like I always called farming is just like people build shitty UIs for DeFi, then build in farming, and that effectively creates like sticky capital because people just like forget and can't figure out how to withdraw it effectively later. But on the other side, as you mentioned, is like historically, like most of the protocols, even if they started as like, okay, we're going to build everything automated, end up needing to introduce some piece of kind of governance control systems, etc., because it is like markets are not static. You can like outside of Uniswap, but like as we all know, Uniswap usually LPs actually lose a bunch of money from internet loss, and so unless there's like a lot like no professional market maker would be doing that unless there's like extra reward and farming effectively that they can participate in. General blockchain, we've seen the challenge been to create actually kind of actively responding applications, and even like kind of from perspective of creating retention for users and other mechanisms, right? Like normally if you build even traditional finance or even casino, like you have a model where you're like, hey, this user is going to churn, let me do something for this user specifically. But the problem is, like, if you do that on blockchain, it's effectively like in the open, and so you have like I call it every poker table you have a world class champion, you know, playing against you, and it's the same poker champion, right? It's the same MEV agent that is gonna be like playing against everyone, and so one of the really interesting things here is it actually brings you confidentiality as well as kind of this verifiability. So now you can have a private state that is captured inside this TE as well, and you're able to kind of have an AI model that predicts that this user was churn, so let's maybe increase the rates for him or for her, or have hey, this is a private credit line. You can actually submit your documents into this. It will scan them, analyze them, and decide, check with FICO database and decide to give you a loan without this information, going to any third parties that then potentially will leak it. So you have like a lot more functionality available. And so we actually can now have more like a traditional applications running on blockchain and decentralized rails while still be verifiable, while still be kind of knowing exactly what's happening with your data and your money at any time.
Yeah, and I think that really gets into like the most impactful potential for shade agents and this idea of like agentic protocols and, basically creating these DeFi protocols that actually have agents as like a core part of the system really is that connection with the real world, right? Like the world that doesn't know what, yeah, like, I think a lot of us believe in the idea that we're going to bring a lot of like real world finance on chain. Um, that being said, there's a lot of context that's going to be necessary for the most effective system that is just going to exist on chain. And I think the Shea agents are like a really um, good way to enable these systems while maintaining those kind of, the trust minimization, like the full verifiability of the non-custodial nature. It's exactly what you just said. I think, yeah, we're like researching even an idea right now, with the kind of stablecoin boom and, that it looks like the bill is going to pass the Senate. We're going to see all these different stable coins that'll be issued. And so but the reality is that most users will not have direct access to, the ability to like basically create and mint these stable coins directly. And so like there's a potential system that could exist that could, basically have these like solvers who effectively are, handling this on behalf of users. Maybe not even like from the user directly, like they could be taking, loans from other systems and like doing things in the real world or like off chain, with this capital. And so it would be necessary for the smart contract and like the lender, the people who are like, basically lending funds to these solvers to have strong guarantees about what it is that these groups are doing with their funds, even if it's off chain, or at least some information about these parties. So I think that's actually going to be, super important. Like you said, I mean, that's probably how we'll get, under collateralized loans to actually happen in DeFi is the fact that like, you can get all this information about, a potential borrower without actually having to bring it on chain. You can use the T's, you can use the gift groups, and you can even have pretty like strong guarantees about what it is they're going to be able to do with the funds, whether that's on chain or off chain. I think that's super powerful.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, as we discussed initially, as this AI agents become more prolific parts of our kind of life, they become commercial agents, they become economic agents. And so the interesting thing is, historically, we effectively go to third parties, which have their own kind of financial motivation as well as potentially, other motivations. And so there's this principal agent problem, pun very much intended, and where the agent kind of doesn't represent um, the principal's best interests. But here we can actually have this where we know exactly what went into the model, we know how to make decisions. You can then go and have even a governance process around that where you say, hey, this model, maybe doesn't always make the most optimal decisions in this kind of cases. Let's give it more training data. Let's give it, reinforcement learning kind of reasoning traces to effectively improve its understanding and decision making and reasoning. And so I think there's a whole opportunity then to have kind of products that are evolving, not based on also people kind of, deciding on policy or kind of, launching a new version and hoping people will migrate, but actually the improvement on the model itself and kind of process around that. So I'm kind of excited, like, effectively autonomous agents that are becoming smarter and more and better at their job, and everybody can inspect that in a very transparent way.
Yeah, I expect we'll see. Yeah, initially it'll be human-based DAOs that'll be voting to make the updates to the system and the model. And then, that like that process should ideally be automated as well, right? So that you can consistently have, and then maybe humans will only vote on like aspect or like goals, because like what is the goal of the model? What are we, and yeah, I kind of just you can still have like the most important control over it, but without having to be even that involved in like the consistent upgrading and testing and everything that we see, kind of like groups or people or even single people having to do. Like when Aave is making updates, they have all these different service providers that provide all this testing data and things like that. We'll even see that be like agents or taking over those roles.
Yeah, so a lot of cool stuff coming. So um, how do we excite people to build more of this agentic protocols?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think our priority so far is basically getting some of these out there for people to actually try and see that these systems are both possible, safe, and more effective than existing systems. I think that's going to be quite impactful. Um, but yeah, no, I mean, I think that is a good question. Is yeah, that's the idea that comes to mind. Curious what you sort of think.
Yeah, I mean, on my side, like, there's definitely kind of a host of protocols coming across. I mean, from Yonder as well as more markets is doing, like, you deposit XRP and they go and find all the farms and effectively farm it automatically from there, which I think, in this more broader theme of like yield agents, right, where you effectively just give it, some asset and you hope either get more of that asset or have a fixed rate, which I think we'll just see more and more proliferation of those different strategies. And, as we know, all those strategies have their own moment and their own time. And so we're probably going to have an aggregator on top of that. I think there's an opportunity to have like a more of effectively active competition where people can, propose different strategies and experiment with them while it is safe for other people to deposit. They know that their money are not leaving, even if strategy itself is maybe not extremely well done. Um, I think there's another aspect. I mean, I mentioned KYC. Actually, I mean, obviously, we've had this Coinbase incident. I actually think we kind of, I mean, there's cases when KYC is needed. And even more important, there's sometimes when you need KYB, and KYB is extremely complex process. So there's know your business. And the challenge there is also every single business has its own set of compliance requirements based on variety of kind of inputs. And so it's been really hard. Like nobody built like on side of, what you'd use for KYC for KYB. Everybody is effectively doing it themselves. And so I think there's a really interesting opportunity where you can effectively have a agentic protocol that is KYB as a service, right? Where let's say I'm a business, I upload all my documents inside this agentic protocol. They're confidential, they're private, they're stored there. And then others who want to KYB and do some work with me, they can run their code inside that secure enclave, right? So effectively, they deploy their functions to verify whatever set of compliance requirements they have, which probably will require actually some LLM, specialized on, reading both their compliance requirements and a bunch of documents, right? Legal documents, articles of incorporation, etc. But the benefit is all of this is fully verifiable. Nothing leaves this container. My information doesn't leave their information. Like I cannot see their checks. They cannot see my information. And it's a fully kind of isolated environment while everyone is, can effectively know that this exact code and procedure was executed. And so I think some of those types of services are really interesting because they can really bring like compliance is, like if even if you look at crypto and non-crypto is even more, any kind of service has like a massive compliance overhead. Um, So I think this can be a massive like example of this products that are starting to really kind of solve real problems for businesses and really bring kind of a reduction in cost. I really like we have whole topic of governance agents, right? Where we effectively have a delegate who is an agent who can run and represent its delegators of the near, for example. And so I think it's also very interesting kind of agentic protocol. And for everyone, like you can obviously reuse that for all other DAOs where you're starting to introduce kind of AI delegates as part of your DAO, where they actually, you know, combine the feedback and create proposals and then vote on it based on the feedback of its representation. So kind of I can see effectively a bunch of DeFi protocols, which is exciting, bunch of governance and bunch of like more traditional kind of solving business needs with this. Um, So yeah, there's a lot to build and kind of while using these tools.
No, I love the idea of like, yeah, solving kind of the participation problem in governance with agents. I think that's, yeah, much needed and something they could definitely get adopted. Um, yeah, I think our goal right now is mainly to make it as easy as possible to build some of these agents. And so like one thing we're aiming to do is to abstract away a lot of the verification aspects of this protocol, like a shade agent stack, which involves, a lot of time writing a smart contract, interacting with it, going through this registration flow. It can be, a bit complicated. It's not overhead. So one thing we're working to do is abstract away pretty much all of that and make it just really easy for anyone who's building an agent, period, and especially any agent that needs to send a transaction on chain. To really just be able to focus on just building that logic, the agent logic, and then they can get it up and running every shade agent with like pretty minimal overhead as a start. I do expect that the most powerful of these agents will be like, using custom smart contracts to enforce a lot of behaviors and actions that can be taken both on and off chain. But I think it's going to be, useful for, guys just getting excited about the potential if they can take a lot of agents they've built, well, again, especially with like Web3 agents, and get them up and running very quickly from story day, fat day, which can like basically take agents they already have and like bring an additional layer of trust and verification and reliability to the users. And then they can start to get in, they're comfortable with these ideas of, different, like the different type of systems and things they can build, like, the kind of, plus minimize KYB, like, boost government agents, like kind of, and frankly, honestly, I think you could replace a lot of, the core DeFi primitives that exist today with these systems and, expand what they can do and then also make them even more the plus minimized and unreliable and powerful.
Yeah, I mean, I should. That was kind of the thought I had, which was even just example of like, hey, here's a Uniswap, but like as a agent protocol, kind of you can write in whatever code you want, right? Python, Rust, JavaScript, TypeScript. Then here is how, with your abstracted tooling, here's how it easy to do that. Then for all chains as well, you don't even need to be like on one chain. And so I think kind of giving few examples of those where it's like almost like side by side. Here's how to build like what you usually imagine needs to be a smart contract to become an agent protocol. Might be a really good way to just also explain to people. Like one of the things I always come back to, like I've judged a lot of hackathons in crypto, and so many times, like effectively people are building kind of the same things over and over again at hackathons because we haven't actually seen those things fully built, because it all gets stuck on then like, okay, I wrote some basic Solidity smart contract or whatever, but then like launching that is super complicated and it's like very expensive, and so we never see those projects actually going live. And so then next hackathon, people haven't seen it going live, so they're trying to build it again. And so I think part of it is also just like showcasing that you can do it a lot easier, faster, with kind of like more traditional primitives, like what you normally build as web server, like you can launch effectively now as a smart contract in this agentic protocol format, and still be able to accept payments from every chain and be able to route funds and deal with digital identities, etc., all in an easy way.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think it would be interesting. Yeah, we can definitely whip up some examples that show that it's like you can, kind of effectively use this as a replacement for smart contracts while still having a lot of the verification guarantees you spent on bets. Yeah, we were thinking about that. We do want to show like, actually, yeah, you can write your agent in absolutely any language and still be able to benefit from the full verification flow. Like, that actually really is completely agnostic enough. As long as you can, right now it's like as long as you can Dockerize it, then you're pretty much good going. At some point, even that won't be a requirement.
Where do we see this evolving, right? Beyond just some of the kind of more shorter term products we discussed.
Yeah, I think it's the way I see the progression going is like, step one is going to be primarily either new protocols or even just kind of layers on top of protocols that they interact with, Aave, Uniswap, these different applications. And that's how it's like basically, yeah, interacting with known and trusted infrastructure is going to be a good way to kind of build, but prove to users that these systems are safe and more effective than existing systems, safe, more effective, and easier to use. That's kind of wave one. And in a way, a little more vanilla, just kind of getting people kind of comfortable with this idea of like agents for really managing your funds. And I think wave two is we're going to see basically expansions of like, okay, what are things that that these that Aave can do right now, or the Uniswap can't do, like where are the gaps in what they're able to do. I think it'll actually be kind of parallel protocols in a lot of way. Probably going into a lot of auction things that really uniting the on-chain, the off-chain world, and especially if you see the regulatory landscape opening up a lot. And then I think wave three is going to be basically, yeah, we'll see that like these systems, probably we'll see, these teams like Aave and MakerDAO, that are kind of upgrading their systems to like really be these truly agentic systems, because that's going to be, the kind of the most obvious and powerful way, to build these primitives. Yeah, that's kind of how we see it going. So yeah, we're, working very closely with some teams to kind of launch these sort of wave one protocols as soon as possible. And I think that, users can expect to see that definitely, over the next couple of weeks and months, like this summer, or the summer of agents. And then, by end of the year and beyond, start to really experiment with these like kind of new protocols. A lot of agents is like a core part of what they offer.
Summer of shade agents
Summer of shade agents, yeah.
like this.
Oh yeah, yes.
There's definitely something about Agent Smith, in sunglasses. Shade agents.
I'm gonna like it. Yeah, we'll have to get some of those memes going. That's a good shade agent, like for Agent Smith.
I have that for agents are on your side.
I like it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot on kind of getting those agents up and running. I think I'm also just looking beyond that to kind of, you can imagine, I mean, effectively all the DeFi has been toward like how to build autonomous business, right? Like something that is kind of operates without, somebody like coming to office every day and, doing compliance and receiving money and like pushing papers around, right? And so uh, we still ended up, with versions of that in discords and forums. And I think uh, looking beyond, and obviously it only like DeFi so far only works with digital assets, right? You cannot do anything beyond this. Here with Agentic Protocols, you can now actually have, for example, a business that does supply chain management, right? Where it actually sends an email to, a producer or a mine if that mine doesn't have like its own agent to talk to, right? It's like, okay, well, I will go back to like a traditional API, which is just an email. And so it can be both intelligent and is able to actually communicate in a human language where it needs to. Um, we can use kind of our intent protocol that, going to have fiat support as well too when it's needed, wire money to a specific, bank account. And so you can actually have now not just DeFi protocols that only work in financial, but you can actually have like a proper commerce fi that is able to like do business, in all the ways that normally people would do it, fully autonomously, and effectively even recruit sometimes people when needed, right, to go and like actually move things while robots are not there yet. So I think like there's an exciting kind of evolution of what business even means for many of these things, and kind of really driving on one side efficiency, on the other side kind of reliability, because we know exactly how this business will behave. You can literally replicate all the inputs and outputs and test it. So I'm really excited to kind of see that future as well coming closer, and kind of this is very much fundamental components of that vision.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think that's actually like an underrated the reliability aspect, I think, is like an underrated benefit. Like people don't think of agents as very reliable. Yes, I think that's why they're great. Like that's not actually something that comes to mind when they think of like what AI is going to be in a role, but like it will actually, and especially when combined with, with all these like verification tooling that us and BDC have been building. Yeah, it really is going to lead to more reliable systems. And yeah, I think you're right. Like actually, the first businesses that'll be like 0% companies that are going to do really well and like replace their non-0% company kind of competitors is going to be businesses that benefit from that reliability. And I think there's a lot that actually come to mind that we could see. We keep seeing people get like hacked for DNS, like their DNS like gets hacked because there's like some person they can call up and socially engineer. And I actually think that's a category or a one similar to that could easily be replaced and just be a far superior product. And basically no humans in the room, or as minimal as possible.
I mean, at some point I was discussing with someone this idea of just like buying, for example, a gas station, and putting a CEO on top of it. And then, you can then even sell back the shares, as a ICO. And so people can like co-own this gas station as holders of the token, while AICO is actually operating, because like, like some of those businesses are very predictable, and also but they do require like management. There's some people management of like staff, etc. And so I think there's an interesting experiment there, which is, it's not even that expensive in crypto terms, right? I think. But if it works, then you can imagine that AICO going to buy next gas station, and effectively, like, the cool thing is that AICO scales to any number of them without any additional people needed. So yeah, so I think there's some interesting, cool ways to actually plug this into real world that people got to start trying.
I think you could sell that idea to some private equity firms pretty well. Like they love a good roll up. And
Go and
if
roll up,
they would
yeah.
use how do we cut as many people as possible? And you're like zero. We don't. Well, we might need some employees, but no management overhead. It's just
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for joining us on this conversation. If you have any questions, drop them below, and we'll see you around X.
Thanks, everyone.